Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel where skincare is all about progression over perfection because perfection doesn't exist. We all know what The Ordinary is. I think it's safe to say, with no exaggeration and no sarcasm on my behalf, I know I could be very sarcastic, The Ordinary really has changed the way the beauty industry and consumers see and consume skincare. Like, in so many different ways. I don't think any of us knew what hyaluronic acid was before The Ordinary launched their serum, niacinamide. And thanks to The Ordinary, and maybe not thanks to The Ordinary, consumers are more clued up on ingredients in their skincare, but also the price points of skincare. I do feel like we maybe all became a little bit too obsessed with the ingredients thanks to The Ordinary. And I say this all the time. We spent so much time adding these actives to our routine and kind of wanting to collect everything The Ordinary had to offer. And that's personally one of the big reasons why I took a break from The Ordinary, because it felt like too much and I was doing too much for my skin. But as I mentioned, it really is thanks to The Ordinary, with what they started in the beauty space, that brands are more transparent with what's in their skincare percentages. We're all a bit more clued up on. They really did change the way we consume skincare. I don't know about you, but I kind of felt like The Ordinary came out of nowhere. We all knew DCM, kind of, and they had that NIOD brand, and we were all a bit like, oh, okay. But when The Ordinary launched, it was August of 2016, and it was DCM's 11th brand, and they launched with what, in my opinion, is a staggering 27 products. I feel like that's way too much. A lot of brands launch with like four or five products. Now, I don't really want to go into all of DCM in this video because The Ordinary really is its own kind of being outside of DCM, which is the Canadian umbrella company. Not selling umbrellas, but umbrella as in they have like loads of different brands beneath them. Over on the YouTube channel, The Diary of a CEO, current CEO and co-founder of DCM, Nicola Kilner, mentioned that The Ordinary kind of came from frustration with the lack of transparency in the cosmetics world, saying that it was really inspired by the pharmaceutical world. And she made a really good point in this video that, when you go to the shop, when you go to the pharmacy, you could either buy like paracetamol, for example, or headache tablets for like 50p up to about £3. And when you see the £3, when you're like, well, that's a bit steep. But you never see headache tablets for £100, because you don't need to pay that much, because the exact same thing is in your 50p headache tablets. So why would you pay hundreds of pounds? And that's really due to the transparency on the packaging of your medicine. It's clearly labeled, and that's what they wanted to do with The Ordinary. They wanted to show that that £100 serum that you might be using may not actually be worth £100, and you can get it for £4.99. So they based The Ordinary on transparency and affordability. You can't argue that this isn't a genius idea. I don't necessarily agree. I do feel like, sometimes skincare can be equated to food. Sometimes you go to McDonald's and you get exactly what you pay for. Sometimes you go to a Michelin star restaurant and get exactly what you pay for. Sometimes it's about the formulation, and if you're into, the luxury of using skincare, knock yourself out, use some really nicely formulated products. We all know some of us have had some issues with The Ordinary's formulations. But the founders had really struck gold with this idea, so let's talk about those founders. Nicola Kilner, the current CEO and co-founder of DCM, actually started her career with Boots. Now, I think Boots is similar to CVS, or Walgreens, I always get told. No, CVS maybe. Here in the UK, you can get skincare, makeup, like drugstore price stuff, but there's also a pharmacy. You can get like toilet roll and medicine. But over at Boots, she was the beauty buying manager of innovation. She really focused on finding smaller indie brands, kind of bringing them into the UK and making them more well-known. And that's really it. There is a lot more to her personal life, but she seemed to have pretty much come out of university, landed a really good job, and then co-founded DCM with Brandon. Brandon True actually started his career as a computer scientist, which I find really funny because there's always comments whenever new skincare brands launch. There's always comments like, was this made by a dermatologist? If not, I don't care. Literally none of your favorite skincare brands were made by dermatologists. None of the most popular ones were. And one of the biggest skincare brands in the world was made by a computer scientist. He did manage to get an internship out of university where he said he worked for one of the big cosmetic manufacturers, a big brand that owns many things. It didn't really say who he worked for. You could probably find it online. I didn't want to dig too deep. But when he was doing, their paperwork and bits, whatever computer scientists do, he managed to see the markups of these cosmetic products, how much they cost and how much they were selling for. And inspired by this, he started his first cosmetics venture in 2003 by launching the skincare brand Yoko, I don't know, Yuoko, with partner Julio Torres. The company did see some success. I never heard of it prior to this. Maybe you didn't either. But they did get a lot of celebrity following. Like Jennifer Aniston always talked about how she loved one of their creams. But this was probably because the price point was luxury price point. One of their products went for about $500, that kind of money. However, Yuoko failed really to gain any success. There was kind of whispers that it was actually sold to somebody, but nothing's really come of it. And I'm guessing, judging by Brandon's next move, it was kind of because the products were too expensive. So that's when he decided to focus on science-backed, more affordable skincare. And that's when he helped launch Indeed Labs. I had, again, no idea he was involved with Indeed Labs, a great brand that are really kind of were like the original Ordinary. But ultimately he left in 2012 and there were kind of rumors of a falling out. But in general, nobody really knows what happened, but it's presumed he didn't leave on good terms. And that's when he went on to create Deciem. I think that's definitely how you pronounce it. Tell me in the comments, please. I've watched so many different people pronounce it. It's all different ways. So he always wanted Deciem to be this incubator brand, this umbrella company. And whilst his kind of contract and agreement at Indeed Labs actually stopped him from creating any other skincare brands for about 2 years after he left, he did manage to kind of find a loophole and start to create supplement drinks, which he was actually working in supplements before he created that Yuoko brand. But eventually he was able to create Neod, and that's really when the cosmetics world really started to pay attention to Deciem. And then with the launch of The Ordinary, this really kind of secured them as one of the most iconic skincare brands, umbrella companies of all time within the skincare space. But Nicola and Brandon never really thought The Ordinary was going to be that good. They never really thought it was going to be so successful. They really launched it just to make a comment on the skincare world, on the manufacturing world, showing that you don't need to pay so much money for good products. So this is when the rise of The Ordinary really started to happen. I think I first did my Ordinary review in January of 2017 or something. And it was in 2017 when they really had their big break. The breakout stars really being the hyaluronic acid serum, the niacinamide serum, you could argue the exfoliant. People were paying attention. It wasn't just influencers, it was celebrities. They were in every beauty article in every magazine, everyone's favorites at the end of the month. They were really gaining traction really, really quick. A writer over at Vox called Cheryl Wishover, I believe her name is, made a really good point in an article she wrote about The Ordinary, saying that they launched around about the same time or just after everyone was becoming obsessed with the Korean 10-step routine. Before the 10-step routine, all we really knew about was cleansers, maybe a serum, moisturizer, sunscreen, and makeup. We didn't know what an essence was, a toner, all these little steps in between. Snail mucin, aloe became a huge thing. All these ingredients that you can argue became huge because of K-beauty. So we were just kind of in the trend of that. And then The Ordinary launched with all their ingredients. So we're like, oh my God, here's more things we can do for our skin. People really had started to treat skincare like the makeup industry. It was becoming fast. People were collecting it. People like myself were doing tutorials online on how to use it. Skincare was gaining traction, and The Ordinary were leading that. A lot of people felt like they were getting, professional kind of grade skincare because of the transparency and the numbers and the words, these ingredients we never heard of at a really affordable price. And it was only a year after the launch of The Ordinary that Estee Lauder actually acquired 28% of DCM. I think for 1.2 billion, because then in 2021 they bought 76%, including The Ordinary in that, which took it to 2.2 billion. Is that how it works? I don't know. They were worth billions, right? This all sounds amazing. DCM had been around for a while, but The Ordinary was brand new, and it really was The Ordinary that got DCM this attention. Yet barely 2 years after The Ordinary's launch, everything just starts to go downhill. This was the start of the downfall of The Ordinary. And it all started with a significant change in Brandon True's behaviour. Nicola Kilner described the work culture at DCM as one big happy family. She said that, they were all there to support each other. There was no superiority complexes. No matter where they worked within the business, they could all rely on each other. With Brandon being somebody who a lot of people, including Nicola, would describe as not only one of the most inspirational, but one of the kindest people they had ever met in their working life. With Nicola saying that this community culture really felt like it being passed down through The Ordinary as well, because, The Ordinary did kind of build this skincare culture. It built this community of like skincare enthusiasts and people who had success stories, and people loved it over on Reddit. It built these little communities. However, in 2018, Nicola got a phone call from Brandon telling her to immediately fly over to Toronto. He was like, turn off your phone, don't look at your emails, don't answer any phone calls, sleep on the plane, just get here as soon as you can. And Nicola immediately knew something was up, and it wasn't just because of the bizarre situation she was in, having to suddenly jump on a flight to Toronto, but also because Brandon didn't sound like himself. She says that he sounded like a completely different person. She knew something bad was going to happen. Now, Nicola mentions that she kind of knew Brandon wasn't really in the right frame of mind around that time of year. She mentions that, he has always been very straight-laced. Whenever they went out, he would have one drink maximum, but often would just have like Diet Coke or whatever. Didn't touch drugs. However, she does mention that he kind of gained a fascination with mushrooms. She says that he did it where it was he first got into it where it was legal. I'm guessing Amsterdam was where he first got into it. But then he kind of became obsessed with kind of like accessing like different planes of reality, and unlocking different versions of yourself and greater versions of yourself, raising your vibrations, which is something different. But all this together, he kind of became obsessed with it. So being somebody who she knew barely ever drank, barely touched drugs, this was a completely different Brandon. She wondered, had this triggered something in him? Had he gone too far? Nicola arrives at Toronto and she goes to a meeting with Brandon and the rest of the team. And she said when she looked at him, she just knew it wasn't him. She said there was this coldness in his eyes, that it just wasn't Brandon. And it was around this time that he started making really rash business decisions without basically consulting anybody else in the business. He was making all these choices without discussing them, and very publicly as well. And one of those big business decisions actually included Dr. Esho. I had no idea about this. Brandon had been working with Dr. Esho on a lip line, which is now its own standalone brand, but back in the day, it was going to be part of the DCM conglomerate umbrella. And to cut a very long story short, the brand kind of launched without Dr. Esho really knowing. Like, he was just getting tagged in posts and saying like, oh my God, I pre-ordered the product. And the brand basically launched accidentally, like a little bit early. However, it was discontinued just 5 months later, and Dr. Esho actually found this out via social media. Brandon took to Instagram saying almost everyone hated the Esho products, and I need to say goodbye to you because you are too busy to love your brand enough. Bearing in mind, this is after Dr. Esho went on QVC and completely sold out the Esho line, a brand which still sells out to this day. So I'm pretty sure no one hated it. And this was just one of many decisions that Brandon would make. And when Nicola tried to call him out on this, she was fired. Basically, she wasn't basically fired, she was fired. She was scared for him. There's nothing she could do, and she was scared for the business as well. But this was just the start of his questionable, controversial, unhinged Instagram posts. At the beginning of 2018, Brandon took over The Ordinary's Instagram page, basically saying that he wanted to connect with the consumer more, connect with the audience more, kind of let them into the world of The Ordinary, a bit of like a behind the scenes kind of action. I guess the first real cause of concern for Brandon happened in February of 2018, when he just posted random videos of piles of rubbish, like big piles of rubbish whilst he was in Morocco. Not just some videos, he posted 7 videos of piles of rubbish. He was kind of filming the piles of rubbish and basically saying that, here at The Ordinary, we're going to commit to 100% plastic-free packaging, and then calls out 2 staff members by name, telling them to kind of get on with it, like contact their packaging suppliers, whilst also firing their current packaging supplier, all on Instagram in front of everyone. Like, this should have been a company email. People like, what, Brandon, like, what are you doing? And around about the same time, if not the same day, he actually posted a picture of a dead sheep on the Instagram page saying that The Ordinary will never test on animals. And around about the same time, he actually posted about one of his factory managers, just introducing him, and out of nowhere says, I'm not gay, he's not my boyfriend. However, it did actually come out later that Brandon did have a secret partner, a male of like 9 to 10 years, I believe they were together. And it's believed, Nicholas says, that he probably didn't come out to anyone because he feared that he wouldn't be accepted. I've discussed this post before, very, very briefly, but in a now deleted post, of course. A woman had asked if Brandon was okay, just because everybody was wondering if he was okay. His posts were becoming more and more unhinged, according to media at the time. And in reply to this, Brandon actually recommended that the woman use a product that was known for its skin lightening properties. Now, everybody kind of saw this as kind of like a racist jab because the woman who asked if he was okay was black. He responded to the racism accusation saying I was actually referring to the anti-inflammatory properties of his product, and everyone was like, sure, fine. And it's so strange because I guess I wasn't really as into The Ordinary in 2018. I don't know, actually. When did I kind of stopped using it for a while, but I kind of missed all this and I don't know how. And honestly, by now, consumers had enough of not just Brandon, but The Ordinary. And after these racism accusations, people were filming themselves throwing away their Ordinary products, even burning some of their products. But posts continued from him. He was posting pro-Trump pictures, but he continued to post on The Ordinary's page, posting pro-Trump content, speaking a lot of shit about homeless people. But it was in April that things really started to take an even more worrying turn. Brandon posted a video where he was being followed by somebody, and you could hear this man in the background. He was at an airport where you charter private jets, and you could hear the man in the background. The man following him was called Jonathan. You could hear him in the back of the video saying, I'm trying to help you, Brandon. You need to calm down. You'll end up getting killed. I'm trying to help you. Please listen to me. Meanwhile, Brandon was replying saying, this is abuse. Please tell them I was getting sued, and this is going to go to the DCM Instagram account in exactly 1 minute. He then posts a video of him crying, and in the comment section, he's saying things like, call 911, this is real, this isn't a joke, help me. There was never really an outcome to this situation other than Brandon posting a picture of himself smiling, kind of suggesting that everything was okay. And by now, people were kind of getting worried, and kind of oddly so, it wasn't really about Brandon, it was more about what's going to happen to The Ordinary, which is kind of sad considering you can really see his having a lot of mental health issues here. But of course, Estee Lauder had to step in and say something. And when asked about these social media posts, Estee Lauder said, Estee Lauder Companies is a minority investor in DCM, and as such, we do not control DCM's operations, social media, or personal decisions. We are deeply concerned by the material that has been posted recently on social media and defend our rights as a minority investor. When asked about the investors, they said they are quietly concerned and watching. They are trying to figure out what the hell was going on there and protect their investment. They're trying to figure out what the hell is going on with this guy. And it was kind of a year of odd posts. It's kind of carried on for a long time, as I mentioned. A lot of political content, a lot of degrading certain groups of people. When finally in October, Brandon posted what I believe was his final Instagram post for The Ordinary, stating that DCM is going to be shut down until further notice. Now, in this video, he's accusing his employees of being involved in big criminal activity. And in the caption of this video, he was threatening people, a really bizarre mix of people, from brands like IT Cosmetics to Brad Pitt. Then DCM was completely shut down. The websites were gone. Now, it's believed that during this whole year that he had been sectioned several times in several different countries. However, every time he was just let out with no real help. The post Brandon made about shutting down the company was when the law stepped in, when shareholders had to step in, when people thought, right, something has to be done. A court order was made to have Brandon removed completely from the company. He was stripped of his CEO title, and that's when things really started to take a real tragic turn. On the morning of the 20th of January 2019, Brandon died after falling from his apartment building in Toronto. I do remember this. I remember thinking, oh my God, did he do this to himself? Did he die by suicide? What happened? Nobody was there. Nobody can say for sure what happened, but his family, his friends, and Nicola do not believe he did this to himself. He did actually post videos that night on his own social media where he did look like he was in an inebriated state. He did look like he was back under the influence, back into his cycle of supposed drug abuse. And his family and friends believe that he tripped, he stumbled, maybe didn't fully know where he was. And Nicola, in her interview with the Diary of a CEO, which is amazing, go watch it, I'll link it down below, says that she just doesn't believe he did it to himself. She doesn't believe that it was a choice that he made willingly. She says, not murder, we're not talking murder or anything like that, we're talking about an accident. She says that knowing who he was, he would have had something to say before he went. He would have had some final words that he would have wanted to share. He would have had to have the last say. So she just doesn't believe that he made that choice himself. It's kind of hard to look back on the post that he made because this was very much like all the articles that I'm looking at this from. This was very much like a media frenzy. This wasn't a story about mental health. This wasn't a story about the breakdown of somebody. This was a story about a gossip that was happening in one of the biggest beauty brands of the time, which it isn't the turn I thought this story would take. You know, we never really got a final diagnosis, not that it's any of our business, but like when you look back at the article headlines and everything, there was real no concern for him. And 100% the posts are hard to look at because, you know, you look at it and you think, what a horrible thing to post. Like, how can anyone post something like that? What a horrible thing to say. Who is this person? But treating this as almost like a celebrity meltdown rather than the real-time mental health issues he was going through, looking back is bizarre to me. It's like, I don't know, was anyone there for him? It wasn't until his death that people were like, shit, like he was really suffering. You know, since Brandon's death, there have been reports and rumors that, you know, he had been found in hotels all across the world with drugs, magic mushrooms, some accusations saying that he was arrested for having crystal meth in his bedroom, in his hotel room. None of them definite facts. And apparently in 2018, Brandon was hospitalized here in the UK, where they diagnosed him with presumptive bipolar disorder and held for a fortnight under the UK Mental Health Act. According to reporter Joseph Breen. Ultimately, the tribunal determined that he could be released. However, Brandon denied that he had any mental health issues. You know, those final moments of Brandon's life, that final year even, wasn't Brandon. And to this day, like his co-workers all say that they miss him. They miss the Brandon who they built this empire with. You know, and despite what he was going through, right till the end, that kind of like family community that he had instilled in the company was still there. All the DCM beneficiaries were all actually in his will. And in his will, he stated that if his boyfriend of 10 years couldn't decide what to do with his body, he wanted Nicola to decide what to do with his body. I really, really do recommend, I know I mentioned it already, but please go and watch the interview, the Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett's channel interviewing Nicola, because the way she talks about is so personal. There's so much more to her and the story of this brand and to Brandon and what they went through other than just these headlines that we've seen. So what about The Ordinary today? So of course, Nicola was reinstated as CEO, and a few people who left DCM during that time or were fired were actually brought back to carry on Brandon's legacy. The Ordinary has of course grown into an even bigger brand, with Estee Lauder actually acquiring most of it. And in my personal opinion, they're making better products now. I think I took a big break from The Ordinary because I was like, oh, another active, another this, another that. But their last 5 launches have been genuinely really interested me, and I've actually really enjoyed them. I have to be honest, while stories like this will never change my mind on how I review skincare, you know, I'm not just going to suddenly love all their products because of stories like this. I do forget that brands have stories and that there are people behind these brands and real world implications to who you support and who you don't support and what brands you support and the reasons why you do and don't. And when people make comments like, oh, it's just skincare, it's just makeup, it's not. It's really not. If you care enough to look into the brand that you're using, the people behind those brands and the stories behind those brands, you're going to find some really interesting stories that may sway your opinion on whether you want to use the brand or not. And I love knowing those stories. Don't get me wrong, I will rip a product to shit if I think it's shit. But it's just nice knowing that there are more than just ingredients that go into your skincare. But yeah, let me know how you feel about this story. As I mentioned, when it was all happening in real time, I wasn't really paying close attention to it. I don't know why. I don't know what was going on. I can't remember. You know, in those years since, I feel like it's been like 3-4 years. I still feel like we know so much more about mental health than we did. And I think especially when it comes to celebrities going through these mental health crisis and, you know, times in their lives, I think we were a little bit more concerned than wanting gossip, you know? Let me know what you think about this story in the comments down below. Chat amongst yourselves. I'll join in the conversation and I'll see you next time.